It is a Celadon bowl that was a gift to me from my uncle, who brought it from Japan. He was a civilian director of the educational troops after the war. So this was one of the things that he sent back. Probably was made before the war. So it's at least probably 80, maybe even 100 years old. It's very possible.
This is a monumental Celadon charger, not a bowl, and its impressive scale immediately suggests a ceremonial or display function rather than everyday use. The glaze possesses the luminous, jade-like translucency that defines the finest Qing Imperial Celadons. At the center coils a superbly carved dragon, rendered in confident relief beneath an even sea-green glaze. On the reverse appears a 6-character rainmark reading Da Qing Yongzheng Nianji, corresponding to the reign of the Yongzheng Emperor, 1722 to 1735. The Yongzheng period represents one of the most refined chapters in the ceramic history of China. Imperial kilns achieved exceptional precision in potting and glaze control. Here, the crisp modeling of the dragon, the subtle pooling of Celadon in recessed areas, and the flawless symmetry of the form are entirely consistent with imperial production at Jingdezhen. Its preservation in a traditional Japanese collector's box aligns with centuries of Japanese connoisseurship, as Japan long prized Chinese Celadon. The condition is remarkably fresh, with minimal wear, which can disguise its true age.
At auction today, in 2021, I would put perhaps a conservative auction estimate of $80,000 to $120,000.
Oh my, really? And it's under my bed all the time?
I think under the bed is not such a bad place to keep this. It's been kept beautifully and it's been kept safely.
I don't know what to say.
I think you've kept it very well for so long. It's in very good hands. I'm so pleased you own this.
I feel like crying.
My husband was flying out of the Pacific right at the start of the Korean War, and he flew into Tokyo, found it in an antique shop, and bought it on installment. Every time he went in, he carried 7 cartons of cigarettes to the man in the antique shop, and that went on until he was about to be transferred back to the States, and he paid off the balance in cash. I don't know how much it was.
What year was that?
That was 1950.
This imposing ceramic horse is an authentic funerary figure from the Tang dynasty, one of the most celebrated eras in Chinese art. Acquired in Tokyo in 1950, shortly after the outbreak of the Korean War, it reflects the complex post-war circulation of Asian antiquities. The decisive factor in confirming its authenticity is thermoluminescence testing conducted by Oxford Authentication, a highly respected laboratory in England. By extracting core samples and measuring the last firing date through controlled irradiation, the test establishes that the sculpture was indeed fired in the Tang period, making it a reliable scientific verification. Artistically, the horse is remarkable for both its scale and its sankai, or 3-color, glaze, with flowing amber, green, and cream tones cascading over the muscular body. During the Tang dynasty, powerful horses symbolized military strength, cosmopolitan wealth, and aristocratic prestige. Such models were created as minki, burial objects placed in tombs to serve and honor the deceased in the afterlife. The robust modeling, arched neck, and expressive stance are entirely consistent with high-quality 8th century examples.
With this authenticity certificate, we would have told you that the insurance value would be about $100,000. In 2007, the market's gone down a bit. It'd be about $80,000 insurance now, okay?
Wow, that's still very good.
It's great, isn't it?
was a gift to my great-grandmother when my great-grandfather was the secretary to the ambassador to China. And they were there during the Boxer Rebellion.
So that's around
in 1900.
In 1900.
Yes. And the siege lasted for 8 weeks. And when the siege was over, my great-grandmother received gifts from the Chinese citizens. They have been so grateful for the kindness that was shown to them.
The unusually large scale of this bowl immediately signals that it was never meant for ordinary domestic use. Its decoration presents the 8 Buddhist emblems, encircling the body amid cloud scrolls and lotus vines, a scheme rooted in classical Ming prototypes. The dense dotted cobalt tones imitate the famed heaped and piled effect admired in earlier porcelains, a technique favored by 18th century artisans seeking antique prestige. On the base appears a seal mark of the Qianlong Emperor, indicating imperial association, while the interior motif shows strong stylistic ties to Tibet, suggesting it was likely produced in China as a ceremonial or diplomatic gift for a religious institution. With its scale, symbolism, and refined execution, the bowl stands as both a historical document and a masterwork of court porcelain.
I would say this should be insured for about $40,000.
Oh my, that's something. That's wonderful.
So you've got
That's
a prize,
wonderful.
and that history and the provenance you've got is truly extraordinary.
I treasure it.
My grandfather's. It was given to him during my father's birth in 1925. I appropriated it from my father about 1968, and it's been in my home ever since.
Examining this porcelain vase reveals immediately that it is no ordinary ceramic, but a refined work from China, identifiable by the dense white body visible at the foot and the distinctive flambe glaze flowing across its surface. This glaze, a technical tour de force named with a French term yet perfected in Asia, blends turquoise, sky blue, and deep oxblood red tones with natural pitting that results from complex kiln chemistry. Such surfaces intentionally echo effects first admired in early Chinese stonewares centuries earlier, and the example here shows the confident control associated with imperial workshops. The mark underneath corresponds to the reign of the Qianlong Emperor, dating it to the 18th century and indicating production for the imperial household, a designation reserved for objects of exceptional standard. Its elegant meiping silhouette, subtly tapering toward the mouth, reinforces that attribution. A single glaze crack runs down one side, likely caused by impact after firing. Yet, this flaw does little to diminish the artistic and historical authority of a vessel that stands as a genuine survivor of courtly porcelain tradition.
You have a treasure from the Qing dynasty, the Qianlong period. I would insure this for $40,000.
Oh my God.
If it didn't have that line, I would insure it for $75,000.
Wow.
My father bought these in Hong Kong in 1947. He was stationed at Clark Field in Manila, took the boat over whenever he could. He was an avid collector of Oriental art, and he also had his clothes tailored there, his uniforms, and one day his tailor told him about a guy who had some stuff to see, so my father went to see him, and he fell in love with them, and he bought them, and we came back to the States in 1950.
This relief porcelain panel set exemplifies the refined narrative craftsmanship associated with workshops active in Jingdezhen, the historic ceramic center of China. The composition unfolds as a continuous visual chronicle of rice agriculture across 4 seasonal stages, beginning with plowing, progressing through sowing and harvesting, and concluding with threshing, a thematic program rarely depicted in ceramic art, where floral allegories are more typical. The sculptural modeling is executed in pronounced high relief, an uncommon feature for porcelain plaques, indicating specialized kiln skill and deliberate artistic ambition. Chromatic evidence provides chronological clues. The presence of Famille rose pink enamel confirms production no earlier than the 18th century, while the iron red dragon ornament, derived from archaic bronze motifs, displays slightly uneven brush articulation, characteristic of early 20th century workmanship, rather than the precision of imperial court pieces. The frame, carved from Hongmu hardwood rather than teak, aligns with luxury mounting practices of that era. Taken together, stylistic language, enamel technology, and carving quality situate the work most convincingly in the 1920s, a period after the Qing court collapse when former imperial artisans continued producing sophisticated objects for private patrons and collectors.
These were not worth very much money.
Okay.
But at auction, how about $40,000 to $60,000?
Okay. Take my breath away. I never would have dreamed. Never, ever. Thank you so much.
You're very
My
welcome.
father would be so pleased. Ah.
My mother and father purchased it back in the early 60s from an antique shop in Chinatown in Chicago.
And how much did you pay for it?
$600.
$600. That was a hefty price in the 1960s
Yes, it was.
to have paid for it.
My folks have told me that it could have come from the Ming dynasty era,
Right?
and that's about all I know.
It's not Ming Dynasty.
It's not Ming dynasty.
No. And it's Chinese export. It was made specifically to sell to the West.
Okay.
It was made in South China, probably in Canton province.
This imposing figure is not Ming Dynasty, as once believed, but an early 19th century Chinese export ceramic produced in southern China, most likely in the Canton region. Created specifically for Western markets during the height of the China trade, such figures were made in workshop settings that functioned almost like proto-industrial factories. Despite being produced in quantity, remarkably few have survived. The subject represents a high-ranking Qing dynasty official. The square rank badges displayed on the chest and back depict a crane, identifying him as a first-rank civil official within the imperial hierarchy. Around his neck hangs a formal court necklace, and beneath the outer garment appears a dragon robe, an honorific costume embroidered with imperial dragons and pearls. His hat, originally trimmed with otter fur and once adorned at the rear with a peacock feather, further signifies elevated status. The modeling remains relatively naturalistic, a trait consistent with figures dating circa 1800 to 1830, before later export examples became more stylized and less refined. These figures were closely tied to the global fur trade, as otter pelts from the Pacific Northwest were exchanged for Chinese luxury goods. Minor condition issues are present but restorable, without materially affecting value.
I would think at auction, this piece should sell for around $40,000.
Okay. Cool.
And wouldn't be surprised at all if it sold for more.
That would be neat.
Yeah. And there were originally two of them, a male and a female figure.
Right.
And at that, you don't even know what would happen in terms of the price. It'd be sky high. They're exceptionally rare. I've never seen any of them outside of museums.
I bought it at a garage sale about 40 years ago.
And what price did you pay 40 years ago?
$10.
$10. Do you know the country of origin?
No, I know absolutely nothing about it. I just saw it and I liked it.
That's the best reason to buy a piece. It's definitively Chinese. The decoration on the vase is what we call Famille noire.
This is unquestionably a Chinese Famille noire porcelain vase, defined by its lustrous black ground and vibrant overglaze enamels. The decoration features prunus blossoms, bamboo, rockwork, and a pheasant, all motifs embedded in the symbolic language of China, conveying endurance and renewal. The form is a classic gourd, or pear shape, elegant and well-proportioned. On the base appears a 6-character underglaze blue Ming rain mark of the Chenghua period, dated 1465 to 1487. However, the vase itself was not made in the 15th century. The cobalt shows a violet tone with painterly depth, unlike the flatter blue typical of many 19th century wares. The foot rim is smoothly worn, consistent with extended surface contact over more than 2 centuries. Enamel wear is gradual and natural, and the interior shows age-related patina. These diagnostic features align convincingly with 18th century production, most likely from the kiln tradition of Jingdezhen, rather than a later 19th century example.
We believe it to be 18th century. Had this been a 19th century vase, the auction estimate would be between $4,000 and $6,000. 100 years difference, these are quite scarce. When they do come onto the marketplace, they're in high demand. So the conservative auction estimate for this vase would be $30,000 to $50,000.
Oh my gosh. Well,
so
I am quite surprised. I had
a prudent $10 investment.
Right, right.
It belonged to my grandfather, who lived in Brooklyn, New York, and I think after the Second World War had some money and he began to buy art. He had a few old master prints and some ceramics, and he died. And then my grandmother, I think, gave things that were more special to the Brooklyn Museum.
Do you know when she gave things to the museum?
I would say 1962 to 1967, somewhere in there.
When did you inherit this piece?
I think just 2010.
This Chinese porcelain bowl traces its origin to the imperial kilns of Jingdezhen, and its refinement is immediately evident in the luminous copper-red glaze and the flawlessly controlled white rim created during firing. Turning it over reveals a rain mark reading De Qing Kangxi Nianji, identifying it with the era of Kangxi Emperor, who ruled from 1662 to 1722. Unlike later tribute marks that merely imitate earlier styles, close study confirms this is a genuine mark and period piece produced for imperial court use, not a retrospective copy. A small collector's label on the base further indicates it once belonged to an early collection, adding provenance interest. Its form is especially rare because most copper-red wares of that period have flared rims or shallow saucer shapes, whereas this example has a distinctive profile believed to relate to ritual use, though the exact ceremony remains unknown. Often called sacrificial red for its rich tone, the glaze is remarkably even and saturated, a technical feat highly prized by specialists.
We found only 2 or 3 that have come up recently. So, if this went up for auction, it would carry a pre-sale estimate of $30,000 to $50,000.
Oh, dear goodness. We didn't have any idea. I assumed it was somewhat valuable, but I have no idea in the world.
Well, my mother was downsizing, and this was one of the items that was in her closet. And she said, "Would you like this?" And I said, "Yeah, it looks interesting, and it might look good in my office." Prior to that, her mother had it. I thought it looked so beautiful, it shouldn't sit in a closet anymore, so I decided to take it out and give it a whole new life.
This vessel is a 16th century ceramic from China, created during the Ming period for an elite patron, and its visual power comes from the rare fa hua technique, in which raised slip lines form borders that hold brilliant glazes, producing a vivid contrast between deep and pale blues. The baluster form, assembled in sections along a visible luting line, reflects complex kiln construction methods, while the robed figures arranged in procession appear to represent immortals, symbolic beings associated with virtue and transcendence. Small hanging bead motifs evoke Buddhist ornament, reinforcing the spiritual narrative. Some facial details were likely repainted centuries later, after ware softened the originals, a common restoration practice. The wooden mounts date to the early 20th century and were added for display. Altogether, the piece unites sculptural form, symbolic storytelling, and technical innovation, making it a striking example of high-status Ming ceramic artistry.
What do you think the value would be for insurance?
Well, it being so old, I don't even know anymore.
Yeah?
I would say maybe $500 to $1,000, maybe.
Well, I think probably closer for insurance purposes, $20,000.
Yeah, that's a little more than what I thought. So, wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
My wife and some friends were at a barbecue, and we were looking through an estate auction catalog. My wife and our friends, they saw this piece, and they really liked the simplicity of the design, just the beauty of it. A week later, I got a chance to go view it in person. I was surprised at how heavy it was.
It is really heavy. I just held it, yes.
And it had some characteristics that made me think it was actually old.
You felt it was old.
It felt it was old, and it had a certificate from the 50s.
This is a substantial and finely potted Celadon dish, and the weight alone immediately signals age and high-fired stoneware rather than later decorative porcelain. The glaze has that soft, jade-like translucency associated with early Ming Celadons, a surface prized for centuries both in China and in Japan. At the center, we see a carved floral medallion, crisply yet naturally cut beneath the glaze. Unlike later wares that confine decoration to the rim with geometric borders, this centralized carving is characteristic of early Ming aesthetic restraint. The perfectly rounded form and balanced cavetto suggest a functional serving dish, possibly used for presenting food in elite settings. During the 15th century, such wares were exported in significant numbers, and Japanese tea masters became especially discerning collectors, valuing the quiet elegance and tactile quality of these pieces. Surviving examples are often preserved in remarkable condition due to this careful custodianship. Stylistically and technically, the carving depth, glaze pooling in the recesses, and overall proportion align with early Ming production, most plausibly from the kiln complexes at Longquan, renowned for their Celadon tradition.
My wife really liked it. She wanted me to continue bidding a little bit more.
Right.
So we ended up paying a bit more than I was planning or even expecting to pay for it. But we got it for just over $3,000.
Oh, right. Okay. The Chinese items are very popular these days. At the auction, I think you can get $20,000 to $30,000.
Wow. Wow.
So you did very well.
My wife did really well.
Congratulations. Yes, congratulations.
To the best of my knowledge, it was purchased in New York when my father took a trip there. Maybe the late 1950s.
There was an abundance of ethnographic Asian works of art being offered in New York. Did he happen to mention what he may have paid for the object?
No.
Do you know what it's made of or from, its composition?
Red lacquer, I understand, is paint of some sort. That's about the extent of what I know.
This object is a carved Cinnabar lacquer vessel from China, most consistent with early to mid-19th century production, identifiable through its unusually large scale, refined carving, and narrative figural cartouches. Lacquer of this type is made from hardened tree sap, layered repeatedly over a core, often wood, sometimes requiring dozens or even hundreds of applications before carving begins, a labor-intensive process that signals luxury status. The decoration shows scholarly scenes, including the classic motif of a reclining drunken poet attended by a servant with wine, alongside other literati figures surrounded by antiques and floral grounds, imagery that reflects the cultured ideals prized by wealthy patrons of the period. Compared with smaller 18th century examples dominated by dragons and symbolic motifs, works of this size and figural richness mark a shift toward more opulent tastes. Its excellent preservation and traditional construction further confirm it predates later mass-produced lacquerwares exported through markets such as New York in the 20th century.
In a retail setting, it would probably sell for around $15,000.
$15,000. That's amazing. It really is. Would be nice to find its mate.
Good luck.
Yes, indeed.
This bowl came into our family as a wedding gift from Madame Chiang Kai-shek and Madame Sun Yat-sen. They attended Wesleyan College in Macon, Georgia, and my step-great-grandmother was the registrar there, and they became very friendly with her. And when she married my great-grandfather, this was given to our family in 1947 from the Song Sisters.
This is not simply a bowl, but a monumental enamel-decorated porcelain presentation box, rich in political and cultural resonance. According to family history, it was given in 1947 by members of the Sung family, including Sung Mei-ling, one of the famed Sung sisters whose influence shaped 20th century China. Educated at Wesleyan College in Macon, Georgia, she maintained lifelong ties to that institution, making such a diplomatic and personal gift entirely plausible. Stylistically, the palette belongs to the Dukai tradition, a restrained yet auspicious combination of underglaze blue and overglaze enamels. The surface exhibits a subtle orange peel texture, consistent with porcelain of the Guangxu period. Turning the piece over reveals a 6-character iron-red rain mark, indicating Guangxu Nianji, anchoring it firmly in the late 19th century Qing court context. The imagery conveys blessings of prosperity, harmony, and longevity, reinforcing its function as an elegant vessel for an interior gift.
For insurance appraisal, I would say a figure that would be more appropriate would be in the $30,000 range.
Oh, is that right? Yikes.
Auction setting, probably around $15,000 to $25,000.
Okay. Well, we will continue to take care of it and continue to enjoy it.
My parents lived in Tokyo prior to World War II, and in about 31 or 32, they used to go to Yokohama for summer vacation because it was so hot in Tokyo. They came back by train, and the train would stop at several places. And at one of them, there was a monk selling this set. So they took all the money they had left from their vacation, and I mean, they pooled it in order to buy these. And I can't tell you how much.
This 5-piece altar garniture is unmistakably Chinese, modeled after archaic bronze ritual forms yet executed in porcelain. The central vessel is a covered incense burner of gu form, flanked by pricket candlesticks, all conceived for temple display. While such ensembles appear in both China and Japan, the decisive evidence lies in the decoration. The continuous lotus scrolls, executed in vibrant overglaze enamels fused onto a high-fired porcelain body, correspond to production at Jingdezhen, the primary ceramic center of China. The color palette is particularly diagnostic. The combination of bright Famille-style enamels seen here did not emerge until the 19th century, ruling out a 17th century date. Stylistically and technically, a mid-19th century attribution is most consistent. The Buddhist lion finial atop the censer functions as a protective emblem, positioned above the aperture where incense smoke would rise. Beneath it appears a double cash motif, symbolizing prosperity. The elephant form legs further reinforce auspicious meaning, though visible chips, cracks, and restorations modestly affect condition.
Has had a broken section and it's been repaired, and some of these legs have been repaired. So that's going to affect the value a little bit. It's worth about $15,000 to $25,000 at auction.
Are you kidding? Oh. Wow. Oh, I'm not supposed to say wow. My parents would be amazed.
My great-grandfather was Baron Patrick Surcouf. He was the French provincial governor of Cambodia and Laos, I think around the 30s.
Okay.
So I have a couple stories that have been passed down through the family of how exactly this came to be, one of which that was actually unearthed and given to him by a government official in the Cambodia or Laos area. And then the second was that they actually purchased it there.
The vibrant green glaze immediately identifies this as a Chinese Celadon export charger, produced for overseas markets rather than solely for domestic use. Its broad, nearly 18-inch diameter and fluted interior make clear that this was conceived as a large serving dish. At the center, a delicately impressed floral medallion emerges subtly beneath the glaze, a restrained decorative device typical of early Ming taste. The color and technique point convincingly to the Celadon kilns of Longquan in China, the primary source of green wares exported across Southeast Asia and the Middle East. The form of the foot rim, with its glazed ring and slightly unusual finish, provides further diagnostic evidence. The technical challenge of firing a ceramic of this scale without warping or fissuring underscores the sophistication of 14th century production. Stylistically, the fluted cavetto and impressed central bloom align with the earliest phase of the Ming dynasty, when Longquan Celadons reached a high point of refinement.
You want to venture any idea on what kind of value this is?
I honestly have no idea.
Well, you might be surprised then if I were to say this was worth somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000 at auction.
Wow. That is very surprising.
My brother was in World War II, in the Navy, and when he came to port, he would buy a lot of these things and send them to our parents. And I ended up with a lot of this stuff. I call it stuff because I know nothing about it.
When was that?
That was in about 42 or 3. He was over by China in that area.
Did he ever explain why?
Well, the guy passed away, and God love his soul. He never got to tell us about him.
This pair originates from the Imperial kilns tradition of Jingdezhen, the historic porcelain capital of China, and stylistic evidence places their production in the Guangxu era of the late 19th century. The base inscription combines Western lettering with Chinese characters, revealing that the English words were added later, likely for export identification, while the rain mark confirms an earlier manufacture date. The surface design is deliberately opulent, filled with bats, lotus blooms, and multicolored clouds, motifs symbolizing happiness, longevity, and prosperity in Chinese visual language. Such dense iconography was intended to convey auspicious abundance, especially appropriate for ceremonial gifting such as wedding presentations. Technically, the decoration required multiple firings because each enamel pigment matures at a lower temperature than the porcelain body, a demanding process mastered by skilled kiln artisans. Minor wear to the gilding along the rim shows age and handling, yet the overall condition preserves the brilliance of the palette and the precision of the brushwork, demonstrating both high craftsmanship and the refined decorative taste characteristic of late Qing court influenced wares.
Want to venture an idea on the value just of these two?
$500 apiece.
Well, I think it's a bit more. It's going to be about $15,000 to $25,000 at
Holy
auction.
Toledo. Well, we'll take better care of them. Be sure no one takes that finish off.
And with the other vase, you're probably in the $30,000 to $50,000 range at auction.
I had a great uncle and a great aunt. They passed them down to my dad, and when my dad passed away, they ended up in my hands.
These are an unusual pair of bowls, immediately striking because their surfaces are molded rather than flat, formed in an intricate fretwork relief that gives them sculptural dimension. Within those raised patterns sit circular roundels painted with remarkably delicate gradations of enamel color, enhanced by touches of iron, red, and fine gilding along the exterior. Porcelain of this refinement traces back to Jingdezhen, the historic birthplace of true porcelain, prized for its translucent yet durable body. A mark on the base reads, Da Ming Chenghua Nianji, referring to the famed Chenghua reign of 1464 to 1487. That mark is honorific, not literal, signaling that the wares aspire to the peak quality of that golden period. Stylistically, the bowls themselves date to the mid-19th century, when craftsmen deliberately revived earlier imperial styles. The wooden stands were made much later, likely between 1930 and 1950 in Asia, added for display. Intended for elite occasions rather than daily use, the pair beautifully merges function and art, which explains their strong desirability and notable auction value.
Conservatively, I think they're worth $15,000 to $25,000 at auction.
Wow. That's all I can say. Do you know how many times I've moved these bowls? I have moved so many times. And they probably have been on 10 moves. And I'm so happy they made it. Thank you so much. I just can't believe that. Oh, wow.
These two they're called scholars pieces. They sit on the scholar's desk and you'd have one flower in them. And I like the monochrome and peach chrome glaze, and when I saw them, got them. This one I bought here in Atlanta from a guy who sells primarily export porcelains, and he calls this domestic, and I like domestic Chinese better than I do export.
These three scholars' vases reflect refined ceramic traditions from China, created for a literati desk where a single stem would complement contemplation and study. Two display the celebrated peach bloom glaze, admired for its soft, mottled tones, yet their bases reveal uneven glaze flow and a slightly gritty foot rim, evidence of 19th century kiln control. The third example, however, shows exceptional technical mastery. The glaze halts cleanly at the foot, the surface feels as smooth as talc, and its copper oxide crushed strawberry tone indicates earlier production, most consistent with the reigns of Kangxi Emperor or Yongzheng Emperor. Its hanging gourd form and precise finish signal imperial-level craftsmanship rather than later commercial wares. Such contrasts illustrate how subtle kiln behavior, glaze chemistry, and finishing methods allow accurate dating, distinguishing later decorative pieces from earlier works of far greater rarity and technical authority, even when all share similar monochrome elegance, first appreciated by collectors and dealers in places like Atlanta.
At auction, these two vases would probably sell for $2,500 a piece.
Okay,
These two here. This one, on the other hand, is much, much more desirable. At auction, I would expect this piece to sell for between $8,000 to $10,000.
Whew.
I had an uncle whose father was a merchant marine in China in the 1920s. He and his wife purchased a lot of Chinese items and brought them back to the United States, and then I inherited these and a lot of other Chinese things.
You have some knowledge about ceramics?
Yeah, I'm a potter by trade.
How would you have made these?
If I was a good potter, I would have thrown them in one piece as far as the pot goes, and then The lid would be separate, the knob would probably be thrown on the lid. Decorate them with cobalt, carbonate, and some sort of a Celadon.
The technical evidence reveals the work of a highly skilled 17th century potter in China. The vessel was thrown as a single form on the wheel, while the lid was made separately and fitted before firing, which explains why both rim and lip remain unglazed so the molten glaze would not seal them together in the kiln. Faint concentric rings beneath the base confirm wheel production, and the rhythmic cobalt wave band near the mouth reflects the controlled yet lively brushwork typical of the late transitional era between dynasties. The Celadon tone and lotus ornament demonstrate confident mastery of glaze chemistry and painted design, and although minor chips appear, the structure, palette, and execution firmly indicate refined workshop craftsmanship from the closing decades of that century.
Nice shape. I would see at auction, a conservative estimate's $12,000 to $18,000.
Nice. That's amazing. Wow.
If you didn't have those chips, the value of these would probably be as the two, $15,000 to $25,000. So that's hurt the value a little bit.
I know my dad was in Shanghai in 1937, and he was purchasing furniture and odds and ends because my mother was coming out to the Philippines. And when she came back to New York in 1941, it all got shipped over. Later on, when I was born, I just remember seeing them on top of the old-fashioned kind of TV in the furniture, and she just said, when you dust, be careful. So in 1998, she moved out to live with us in California. They came, and they've been packed up ever since, and we decided maybe now was a chance to see what they were worth.
This pair of porcelain vases originates from China and was produced around 1920 during the Republican era, when master artisans adapted imperial traditions for a new market. Their form, decoration, and finely painted landscapes reveal deliberate homage to works of the Qianlong Emperor, whose reign defined technical perfection in porcelain. The mark on the base reflects that admiration rather than true 18th century manufacture, functioning as an honorific signature that signals style instead of date. The symmetry between the two pieces confirms they were conceived as a pair, and the precision of the brushwork, balanced composition, and luminous glaze demonstrate unusually high quality for their period. Historical context supports this dating as well, since objects of this type were widely exported through ports such as Shanghai in the early 20th century.
If they were Qinglong, yes. But the Republic, as I say, an auction market price for this pair would be between $12,000 and $18,000.
Wow, that's
in
incredible.
Today's market.
Yeah, well, thank you for that.
Well, it's been in my family for as long as I can remember. I remember going down to Brownsville and seeing it at my grandmother's house. I'm not sure exactly how it came into the family, but...
And do you have any idea as to its age?
No, I know it's nice because we can put your finger and you can feel the paint or whatever, the enamel that's on it. And so it tells me I think it's a little bit nicer than the ordinary vase.
Examining this vase, it is immediately clear that it is a Chinese porcelain work distinguished by raised enamel decoration in the moirage technique, where slip-like enamel is applied in relief before firing. The yellow ground is adorned with Indian lotus scrolls and a ru-yi-shaped collar symbolizing auspicious power, alternating with figural cartouches depicting scholars in rocky landscapes and elegant ladies in gardens, all classic motifs of Chinese decorative art. The mark on the base honors the Qianlong Emperor, whose 18th century reign is famed for the finest imperial porcelains, yet stylistic evidence such as the iron-red overglaze mark, thicker foot rim, and overall form indicates a late 19th to early 20th century date. Such marks functioned as tributes rather than forgeries, signaling reverence for an earlier golden age of craftsmanship. Minor enamel loss confirms age and authentic use, Pieces like this were often originally made as pairs, though time frequently separates them.
Now we come to value. In a retail setting, this vase would carry a price tag of $12,000 to $15,000.
Wow. That's more than I thought. Thank you.
My mom collected Oriental stuff in the 80s and found this at an auction house in Nairobi, which is where they were living, and I don't know how much she paid for it. She called this a double gourd vase. She was quite sure it was Chinese. That's all I know.
Well,
this object presents itself as a refined cross-cultural artwork, a porcelain double gourd vase originally produced in China and later embellished in France with ornate gilt bronze mounts. The form follows the classic Chinese auspicious gourd silhouette, yet the mounts of entwined serpents, bundled reeds on foliate feet, and a capital-like rim derive unmistakably from Western classical design. The glaze surface is especially striking, displaying a vivid blue ground speckled with magenta oil spot effects, sealed beneath a glassy finish. A technical pursuit inspired by the Chinese fascination with imitating natural textures in porcelain, an aesthetic ideal that reached its height during the reign of Qianlong Emperor. The covered base, filled with a lacquer simulating compound, prevents inspection of marks, but stylistic synthesis suggests the vase left China in the 19th century and was later mounted in Europe for a luxury market.
That if this came up for auction, we believe it would likely sell in the range of $8,000 to $12,000.
Fantastic. I thought it was worth something, but I thought it was maybe $1,000. So that fills in the blanks.
It belonged to my father-in-law, and he got it from a relative that was in China. I've always liked it, and really just kept it in an out-of-way place.
So the first thing when you look at an object like this is to identify what one can by the shape.
This vase is identified as a Chinese porcelain work by its form, featuring a tapered neck, ovoid body, and elevated foot typical of pieces produced in China around the late 19th century. The surface displays the celebrated powder blue ground, achieved by blowing pigment through a bamboo tube to create an even mist-like finish, rather than visible brush gradients. Over this luminous field lies finely applied gilding, laid in thin sheets onto adhesive and then tooled to reveal intricate motifs, sometimes enhanced with painted gold details. Decorative symbolism is especially rich. Bats signify good fortune. Stylized clouds and flames suggest celestial energy, while a sinuous dragon pursues the flaming pearl of longevity opposite a majestic phoenix with elaborate plumage, a classic pairing of imperial harmony. The thin brown rim and faint reddish tones beneath the base result from kiln heat, diagnostic traits of wares from about 1900. Despite lacking a rain mark, craftsmanship, iconography, and condition confirm it as an excellent surviving example of high-quality late 19th century decorative porcelain.
What a terrific example. It's in great shape. This would sell for $8,000 to $12,000 at auction.
Wow. That's good to know. I don't think I'll be selling it anytime soon.
My mother-in-law collected Asian pottery and Asian plates, and she gave this piece to my husband and I. That's really about all I know about it.
Do you know where she
I
bought
believe
it?
I do not. And she traveled a lot, and she collected things wherever. She bought them at different estate sales and wherever she would come across them.
Do you have any idea how old this is?
No, I don't.
What stands before us is a superbly composed incense burner, assembled from elements of different but harmonious periods. The Celadon body itself is the earliest component, a Longquan stoneware censer made around 1250 during the late Song to early Yuan era. Its glaze displays the prized kingfisher feather tone, that luminous bluish green regarded as the finest expression of Longquan production from Longquan in China. The carved mallow blossoms beneath the glaze are crisply articulated yet softened by the pooling of Celadon in the recesses, a hallmark of high-quality 13th century work. Originally, the vessel would have been filled with sand so that incense could be burned safely on the surface. The domed cover and fitted stand were added later, during the reign of the Qianlong Emperor between 1736 and 1796. The jade finial atop the lid dates even earlier, to the Ming dynasty. The carved hardwood base, executed in Hongmu and ornamented with ruyi motifs symbolizing "as you wish," completes the presentation with refined 18th century taste. Minor hairline cracks are consistent with age, yet the overall effect remains magnificent.
On this thing. In its present condition, at auction, we would expect this to sell between $8,000 to $10,000.
Okay, wow.
And it's just a wonderful piece, absolutely typical Lung Chuan, with really fine quality.
Yes, well, she'll be delighted to know.
My mother's father worked in New York, and he bought it there and brought it back this is the turn of the century. And she had it in her place for, it was about 50 years, I guess. Then I finally got it in my place when my mother passed away. And we just love it. We use it as a decorative piece in the house.
And do you know the country of origin or age?
I was just told by her. She said Chinese. I was told this was a fish bowl.
This object is a Chinese export porcelain fishbowl, produced around 1840 to 1860, most likely in Guangzhou, the principal hub for ceramics made for overseas trade from China. Such bowls were typically created in pairs and served both decorative and functional purposes for domestic interiors and merchant households. What distinguishes this example is the exceptional enamel work. The figural cartouches display finely articulated faces, precise hair detailing, and carefully defined red lips and noses, indicating a higher tier of craftsmanship than later 19th century export wares, which often show hurried painting and weak coloration. Surrounding foliate bands and molded mythical beast ring handles echo archaic bronze vessel forms, revealing how potters consciously referenced antiquity to enhance prestige. The result is a refined synthesis of mass export production and elite decorative artistry, representing one of the finest grades of mid-19th century Canton porcelain.
The value at auction for a single fishbowl mid-19th century of this quality would be around $6,000 to $9,000.
$6,000 to $9,000? Okay.
For insurance purposes, probably around $15,000.
All right. That's nice.
A wonderful object.
Thank you.
Grandmother just recently passed away, and I inherited this and a few other pieces. She got this from Hong Kong, where she used to live.
Oh, really?
My grandfather used to work in the shipping business, and he had a lot of friends, and she would go over to different friends' houses, and one in particular just loved her personality, and she would like a piece, and a month later, he'd give it to her as a gift.
This porcelain vessel from China is a sophisticated Republican period pastiche that deliberately revives the finest decorative vocabulary of Qing court ceramics, while not actually dating to that dynasty. Its surface combines multiple high-skill techniques such as vivid Famille rose-style enamels, gilded highlights, molded dragons, scrolling foliage, and layered glazes, all orchestrated into a tour de force display intended to evoke imperial taste. The landscape painting reveals confident brush control and tonal gradation, typical of workshop masters producing luxury wares for elite clients, and export circles in places like Hong Kong. On the base appears a seal mark of Qianlong Emperor, yet this is apocryphal, meaning it signals homage to an admired reign rather than true 18th century manufacture. Minor rubbing to the gilding shows age and handling, but aside from that condition note, the piece stands as an excellent example of early 20th century ceramics that consciously synthesize historical styles to satisfy collectors who prized classical imperial aesthetics.
Is now in this particular condition worth between $6,000 and $8,000.
Oh, wow. Damn.
And you know what?
What?
If all the gilding were intact,
Yeah.
it'd be worth at least $10,000 to $15,000 at auction.
Jeez.
But it's a marvelous, marvelous example of what we call the Republican period wares.
Jeez. Wow. That's awesome.
My mother and father went to China in the late 1970s, and my father liked the colors on these and had them sent back a pair. Then my father died, my mother died, and the house items were being tagged for a sale, and the person who was doing the tag sale said that these are beautiful decorative items, possibly a few $100s, and I thought for that I would like to hold on to them.
These plaques are finely painted Canton enamels executed on copper, a technique that reflects the dynamic artistic exchange between Europe and China in the 18th century. The method of enameling on a metal ground originated earlier in places such as Limoges and was later adopted and transformed by workshops in southern China, particularly around Guangzhou, historically known as Canton. By the Qianlong era, this cross-cultural dialogue had produced highly sophisticated enamel wares for both domestic elites and export patrons. The subject here, a scholar attended by a youthful assistant within a landscaped setting, is quintessentially Chinese, embodying ideals of cultivation, refinement, and scholarly virtue. The scale is unusually large for Canton enamel plaques, and the painting displays confident brush control and nuanced coloration. Close inspection reveals minor edge losses, enamel fractures, and areas where the brown copper substrate subtly emerges, along with light surface scratching. Such condition issues are not uncommon in enamels of this age.
All of those would lead me to put an auction estimate of $5,000 to $8,000 on it.
Is this for the pair or?
This is for a single.
Wow.
So a pair, I would put an auction estimate at $12,000 to $18,000.
My mother and dad were living along the Ohio River in 1937 when the flood occurred. They were in their 30s. They decided to just go to New York City and have an adventure and go to some Broadway shows instead of cleaning up after the flood. And while they were there, they purchased this vase. And when I was going to live alone and be single and live a life like Mary Tyler Moore, my mother gave me this vase, and I've had it for about 40 years.
This vase is identifiable as a refined product of Chinese Republican period porcelain, created after the fall of the Qing court, when former imperial artisans redirected their mastery into the private market. The 6-character rain mark on the base honors the Qianlong Emperor, yet the glaze tone, enameling style, and compositional balance clearly place it in the early 20th century rather than the 18th. Such honorific marks were not intended to deceive, but to convey prestige, signaling that the workmanship aspired to imperial standards. The piece reflects a transitional historical moment when craftsmen projected cultural continuity and national optimism through luxury wares. Its strong state of preservation allows the painted surfaces and kiln control to demonstrate the technical confidence of that era. Objects of this type, once overlooked for seeming too recent, are now re-evaluated as important evidence of artistic adaptation and changing markets. It is understandable that it has been treasured for decades, admired much like the independent spirit associated with Mary Tyler Moore, uniting elegance, history, and narrative within a single decorative form.
20 years ago, this would have sold at auction for maybe $200 to $300. But today, people in China are collecting this, and it's a budding area of interest. So at auction, this would sell in the range of $5,000 to $8,000.
My goodness, that's quite a return on that investment. I loved it, and I will continue to love it even more, perhaps.
My husband's great-grandfather was secretary to the ambassador to China. It was in 1900. He was there with his wife during the Boxer Rebellion, under siege. The Boxers were really brutal to the Chinese Christians in the beginning, and they actually took several in and protected them. So as a gesture of their gratitude, they presented them with this gift of a vase.
This ceremonial vase from China reflects the late Qing revivalist aesthetic, created around 1900, yet deliberately echoing antiquity to convey prestige and symbolic depth. Its silhouette recalls the ancient bronze Hu form of the 2nd century, evident in the fixed ring handles that imitate the movable rings of archaic metal prototypes. The decoration is rich with auspicious imagery. Rising cloud scrolls suggest heavenly blessing. A carp leaping from waves signifies success and advancement. And dragons pursuing a flaming pearl represent cosmic power and wisdom. On the base appears a 6-character reign mark of Wanli Emperor, but stylistic and technical evidence shows it was actually produced during the reign of Guangxu Emperor, making the mark honorific rather than literal. Such retrospective marks were intended to evoke classical authority and elevate the object's status as a diplomatic quality gift. Despite a star crack caused by impact, the vase remains a refined example of late Imperial craftsmanship, blending historicism, symbolism, and technical control.
You have an idea of the value?
I have no idea. I think it's very pretty, and the story is so interesting.
Well, it's worth about $5,000 to $8,000 at auction.
Whoa, holy cow.
That it is a pillow, but it seems to be very large and angular compared to other pillows that I've seen that are Chinese. I've been told it could be a table, so I really don't know.
What it actually is, it would still be referred to as a pillow, because one thing about Chinese pillows is they are not soft. They're hard. They use the word pillow, but what it actually is, it's an armrest.
Really?
This vividly decorated object is in fact a Chinese ceramic pillow, although the term can be misleading. In traditional northern Chinese homes, people often rested on a heated brick platform known as a Kang bedstove. Instead of soft cushions, hard ceramic pillows served as cool armrests during the humid summer months. The porcelain body retained a refreshing coolness, making it practical in warm weather while also functioning as a decorative object. The pillow is richly painted in polychrome enamels and covered with lively narrative scenes. These include figures from Chinese theater, auspicious motifs, and imagery associated with Taoist immortals, all arranged so the viewer could rotate the piece and enjoy different compositions. Decorative openings along the sides resemble traditional cash coin symbols, referencing prosperity while also serving a practical purpose during firing, by allowing heat and air to circulate inside the ceramic body. Stylistically, the palette and energetic brushwork suggest production in southern China during the late 19th century, likely between about 1865 and 1880. The vibrant tone of the decoration reflects a period when artisans were emerging from the turmoil of the Taiping Rebellion, a time that influenced the celebratory and colorful character seen in many decorative wares of the era. Objects of this quality were not typical household goods for peasants, but were more likely owned by prosperous merchants or members of the urban middle class.
Well, talking with my colleagues, we came up with an auction estimate of $5,000 to $7,000.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I got a bargain. One of my roadshow bargains. That's
Yeah,
great.
beautifully painted.
Yes.
Really nice one.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I remember that it was in my mother-in-law's front hallway. I asked my husband about it, and he said that he doesn't remember ever not seeing it at his grandmother's. We just liked it because it smiles. It seems to smile.
It does smile. So what do you think this is?
I always called it a yak. My husband recently kept telling me it was a water buffalo.
Well, your husband's right.
The modeling immediately identifies this as a recumbent water buffalo rather than a yak, an animal of profound importance in agrarian life across southern China and much of Southeast Asia. Here the beast is shown at rest, yet the sculptor has emphasized its powerful musculature, acknowledging its role as a working animal essential to rice cultivation and rural prosperity. The glaze is particularly striking. The rich oxblood red tone derives from copper in reduction firing, carefully modulated to differentiate the body from the snout, tail, horns, and hooves. That controlled variation demonstrates considerable technical sophistication. Along the spine, the glaze thins and pulls slightly, cascading down the flanks in even rivulets, a visually dynamic effect prized in southern kiln production. Turning the figure over reveals two vent holes that allowed air to escape during firing, as well as kiln adhesion marks along the foot rim where the glaze contacted support material and was later ground smooth. Although unmistakably Chinese in conception and palette, this was not produced at the Imperial kilns of Jingdezhen. Instead, stylistic and technical features align with Guangdong ware from the Guangzhou region, historically known as Canton. The fitted hardwood stand, carved to echo the animal's contour and ornamented with naturalistic motifs, enhances its presentation. Based on modeling, glaze, and comparative examples, the piece dates to the late 19th century.
I can say with pretty good degree of certainty, this was made in the latter part of the 19th century. And I would say if this came up in an auction sale, we would expect it to make between $5,000 and $8,000.
I'm sorry I've abused him. Wow, he's really special. Not just a smile.
We took a month-long trip to China right after it opened. That was in the early 80s, and it was still very unmodern, but they did have art stores. We went in one and saw this and loved it. She said it was around the Qianlong period.
This molded porcelain plaque, formed in the elegant shape of a folding fan, reflects the revivalist spirit of early 20th century China rather than the Qianlong era to which it was once attributed. The subject depicts one of the early Taoist immortals, a hermit figure later associated with spiritual cultivation and the quest for longevity, accompanied by an attendant. Above him appears a bat, a visual pun in Chinese culture where the word for bat, fu, echoes the word for good fortune, thus conveying blessings of prosperity and happiness. Although initially thought to date to the reign of the Qianlong emperor, stylistic evidence suggests a later production, most likely in the 1920s during the Republican period in China. Qianlong plaques were typically landscape-oriented and rarely molded in relief. By contrast, this example employs molded modeling to create dimensionality, a comparatively scarce technique among porcelain plaques, which are usually flat and rectangular with painted enamel surfaces. Two qualities elevate this piece above many contemporaries. First, it is unsigned, avoiding the common Republican-era practice of adding spurious master signatures. Second, the molded fan form itself is unusual and technically demanding.
What did you happen to pay for it in the 80s?
It was around 500, I think.
Not inexpensive.
No.
The plaque would probably carry a retail value of $4,000.
Oh, very nice. Thank you.
I received it from my grandmother, who got it from a friend of hers who was an antique collector about 30 years ago.
Oh, that's marvelous. It's a Chinese eggshell porcelain bowl.
Okay.
Eggshell means, of course, very thin. So thin that you really have to be careful handling it. And it was originally one of a pair. So probably what happened to the other one is somebody broke it.
This delicate eggshell porcelain bowl from China is a remarkably thin ceramic work produced in the 1920s, created in conscious imitation of earlier imperial wares. Its translucent body and finely painted decoration of elegant court ladies reflect a style intentionally designed to evoke classical taste, especially appealing to Western collectors who associated such imagery with traditional Chinese refinement. The base bears a reign mark of the Qianlong Emperor, a prestigious name often used on later decorative pieces to suggest imperial quality rather than actual 18th century origin. Bowls like this were commonly made for export or for expatriate buyers living in Asia, which explains their blend of technical finesse and commercial styling. The extremely thin porcelain, known as eggshell ware, required exceptional kiln control and skilled handling, since even slight pressure could crack it. Originally part of a pair and accompanied by an ornate stand, it represents a fascinating intersection of craftsmanship, global trade taste, and historical revivalism.
Now, at auction, you'd be looking at an estimate of $2,000 to $3,000.
Awesome.
Now, if you had the pair,
it would be
somewhere in the vicinity of about $8,000 to $12,000.
Wow.
So,
That's
good
amazing.
timing. Good
Perfect.
timing.
I'm a collector, so I look for odds and end pieces. I went into this flea mall. This piece caught my eye, and it had flowers in it, and I was like, wow, I like that vase. I'm like, how much? She said $25, and I was like, okay, would you take 20? And she said, it's pretty old, and I was like, how about you keep the flowers, and I'll take the vase for 20.
Now, when was that?
It's been over a year ago, almost 2 years.
And where was that?
In Columbus, Georgia.
This intriguing vessel, discovered in a flea market in Columbus, embodies a deliberate revivalist aesthetic rooted in the artistic legacy of China. Its composite design borrows from several archaic ritual forms: the Hu silhouette derived from ancient bronzes, the square Kong profile associated with burial jades, and the suggestion of early lidded cooking vessels. All combined not as literal copies but as scholarly references meant to evoke antiquity. The palette of black ground with green, yellow, and aubergine enamels closely recalls wares admired during the reign of Kangxi Emperor, a period celebrated for stability and artistic excellence. Yet technical and stylistic evidence places this example later, around 1880 to 1900, when artisans intentionally quoted earlier golden ages to project cultural continuity during political uncertainty. Such historicizing design, along with its confident enamel work and symbolic archaism, marks it as a thoughtful late Qing revival piece rather than an actual 17th century original.
So I think, realistically, this is worth somewhere between $1,200 and $1,800 at auction.
Okay.
I think
Wow.
that's a realistic value.
Wow, okay. That's great. I've been watching the Roadshow for many, many years, so I was just so excited. We couldn't wait to get here. So this is a dream come true for me.